We are now in the season of Advent. The themes for each Sunday of our Advent worship series were born out of our current context: COVID-19, Black Lives Matter, the presidential election, political divides, social unrest, growing economic disparity. When I turned to the birth narratives of Jesus, I encountered characters in the God story who were experiencing similar feelings we find ourselves facing today: aloneness, abandonment, alertness, awareness, fear, and anxiety. Zechariah, Elizabeth, John the Baptist, Mary, and Joseph all experienced these human emotions as the story of God moved towards the incarnation. This Advent season, we will explore how God is addressing us through our feelings of loneliness, fatigue, fear, and frustration. We will still be lighting the Advent candles of hope, peace, joy, and love that adorn our Advent wreath. But my prayer is that as we move through our feelings of sadness and loss, we will discover hope and peace resides right there in the midst of our struggle. A special thanks to Hannah Shelfer, who is designing the artwork for this series. Hannah created these digital drawings for today, the first Sunday of Advent. The themes are alone and abandoned. Hannah offers us this description of her work. I was inspired by the theme of alone, abandoned, and wanted to connect it to COVID-19. The first image focuses more on the pandemic as a whole, with Fauci and the vaccine as the staff of Hermes. The second focuses on the feelings of being abandoned. I wanted to convey the emotions of medical workers as they do their best to treat patients during this pandemic.
Join us in prayer.
We have been living in alone. Lonely hallways and assisted living, lonely living rooms, echoing TV chatter, lonely cubicles vibrating to the hum of the heater. We have been living and cut off. A lonely mother cut off from her children, a lonely drunk cut off from recovering meetings, a lonely island cut off from the city by a broken bridge. We have been living and abandoned by leaders, abandoned by law enforcement, abandoned by the government. Now we live in Advent, anticipating a future, anticipating healing and wholeness, anticipating a vaccine, anticipating reunions, anticipating community, anticipating God with us. Thank you.
Hi kids, it's Pastor Sarah, and this is baby Esther. You can call her Ezzy. Now, baby Esther is brand new. She's only 3 months old, and she is learning how to communicate. What are some ways that you communicate? Oh, honey. What are some ways that you communicate? You communicate with your voice, and that's exactly what Esther's doing right now. When she cries, she's trying to tell me something. Oh, sweet pea, it's okay. You communicate with your body language, when you smile, when you laugh, when you frown. Oh, honey. Okay, well, this might not work. It's okay, baby girl. You want to see this? Here, look. Say hi to all your friends, honey. Look at that pretty light. There are lots of ways that we communicate. And when a baby is born, they don't know how to talk yet. And so they have to communicate by crying, by laughing, by waving their arms. When Esther is hungry, she actually chews on her hand, and that's how I know she needs to eat. There are different ways that we communicate with each other, and there are different ways that God communicates with us. What are some ways that God communicates with you? Maybe through a friend giving you a compliment or helping you. Maybe through a family member who encourages you and cheers you up when you're feeling down. Those are ways that God talks to us and reminds us that we are loved by God. So I want you to think about how you communicate with others and how God might be communicating with you. Let's pray. Loving God, we thank you for all the different ways that we can communicate with each other. Help us to be aware of how you communicate with us, how you tell us that you love us, especially through the person of Jesus. In your name we pray, amen. Amen. Good job, Ezzy.
A reading from the Gospel of Luke, chapter 1, verses 5 through 23. In the days of King Herod of Judea, there was a priest named Zechariah who belonged to the priestly order of Abijah. His wife was a descendant of Aaron, and her name was Elizabeth. Both of them were righteous before God, living blamelessly according to all the commandments and regulations of the Lord. But they had no children because Elizabeth was barren, and both were getting on in years. Once, when he was serving as priest before God and his section was on duty, he was chosen by lot, according to the custom of the priesthood, to enter the sanctuary of the Lord and offer incense. Now at the time of the incense offering, the whole assembly of the people was praying outside. Then there appeared to him an angel of the Lord, standing at the right side of the altar of incense. When Zechariah saw him, he was terrified, and fear overwhelmed him. But the angel said to him, "Do not be afraid, Zechariah, for your prayer has been heard. Your wife Elizabeth will bear you a son, and you will name him John. You will have joy and gladness, and many will rejoice at his birth, for he will be great in the sight of the Lord. He must never drink wine or strong drink. Even before his birth, he will be filled with the Holy Spirit. He will turn many of the people of Israel to the Lord their God. With the spirit and power of Elijah, he will go before him to turn the hearts of parents to their children and the disobedient to the wisdom of the righteous, to make ready a people prepared for the Lord." Zechariah said to the angel, "How will I know that this is so? For I am an old man, and my wife is getting on in years." The angel replied, "I am Gabriel. I stand in the presence of God, and I have been sent to speak to you and to bring you this good news. But now, because you did not believe my words, which will be filled in their time, you will become mute, unable to speak, until the day these things occurred." Meanwhile, the people were waiting for Zechariah and wondered at his delay in the sanctuary. When he did come out, He could not speak to them, and they realized that he had seen a vision in the sanctuary. He kept motioning to them and remained unable to speak. When his time of service was ended, he went to his home.
Join us for scripture reading Luke chapter 1, verses 24 through 25. After those days, his wife Elizabeth conceived, and for 5 months she remained in seclusion. She said, "This is what the Lord has done for me, when he looked favorably on me and took away the disgrace I have endured among my people." Luke chapter 1, verse 39 through 45. In those days Mary set out and went with haste to a Judean town in the hill country, where she entered the house of Zechariah and greeted Elizabeth. When Elizabeth heard Mary's greeting, the child leapt in her womb, and Elizabeth was filled with the Holy Spirit and exclaimed with a loud cry, "Blessed are you among women, and blessed is the fruit of your womb. And why has this happened to me, that the mother of my Lord comes to me? For as soon as I heard the sound of your greeting, the child in my womb leapt for joy. And blessed is she who believed that there would be a fulfillment of what was spoken to her by the Lord."
Will you pray with me? May the words of my mouth, the meditations of all our hearts, be acceptable to you, O God, our rock and our Redeemer. Amen. Amen. The last time I went more than 2 Sundays in a row without attending in-person worship was my first semester of college. Even though I was studying to become a pastor, I went 3 months before I attended church, and those were some of the most loneliest times of my entire life. Eventually, I realized that something was missing. I needed community, spiritual community, Christian community. I decided to attend a Wednesday evening service hosted by a United Methodist campus ministry, the Wesley Foundation at Illinois State University. Now, before I found ISU Wesley, I did attend another church, but the theology did not resonate. The people were kind, but truth be told, I needed more than kindness. I wanted someone to relate to, a community with the capacity to live in the questions of a life faith presents rather than seeking certain answers. When I walked into the old church gym for my first Wednesday night service at ISU Wesley, I was greeted with kindness, but the Spirit moved in a deeper way. Through the sweaty hands of other lonely college students making awkward introductions, trying to come off as confident, through an acoustic guitar played through a low-tech sound system that garbled with feedback, through questions the scripture selection raised that had no easy answers, through a campus minister who embodied a passion for connecting students to divine presence within themselves. It felt like a place I could belong, and that faith community became my home for the rest of my college experience. When you belong, your feelings resonate beyond you as an individual. Think about it. When you chose to come to worship at Tibbetts for the first time, what made you come a second time, a third time? What made you keep coming for 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years? Something kept you coming back. There was something in the service, the people, the music, the sermon that resonated with you. It grabbed a thread of your spirit and tugged hard enough that you were pulled in a certain direction. It's what resonates deep within your soul that keeps you connected to community. In order to know loneliness and abandonment, we must first know what it is to belong. We must have the contrast of that experience of a deep sense of connectedness to others. To belong is to be a part of something beyond yourself, a community, a church, a team, an organization, a social circle, a family. Zechariah knew what it was to belong. He belonged to a faith community, and he belonged to the priestly order of Abijah. Now, King David had divided the priesthood into 24 orders, each to serve at various times in the year at the temple. Zechariah belonged to one of those divisions, and Luke chapter 1 tells the story of what happened to Zechariah during his service in the temple. The text tells us that Zechariah and his wife Elizabeth had no children, and though the desire was there, their bodies had aged beyond their reproductive years. So it's not a surprise that when the angel Gabriel appeared to Zechariah when he was in the temple, offering news that Elizabeth would give birth to a son, Zechariah was both afraid and skeptical. "How will I know that this is so?" he replied. Zechariah was looking for some evidence, some assurance, because what Gabriel was suggesting was counter to what Zechariah knew to be true and possible. Gabriel tells Zechariah that he will be mute until these things come to pass. When Zechariah leaves the temple, he tries to communicate with the priesthood gathered outside. And the text tells us that because he could not speak, he was motioning to them. He experienced an immediate loss in the way of his own words, his own voice. He could not communicate with his priesthood the way he always had. He was forced to motion to them. He could no longer be part of his community in the same way. He was cut off. This resonates with how many of us are feeling in regards to COVID-19. We've experienced a deep loss of weekly gathering for worship and fellowship, loss of communicating with each other face to face, loss of spending time with family and friends. What happens when we are cut off? We experience feelings of abandonment and self-doubt. Maybe we wonder if anyone remembers us or cares about us. The psychological, emotional, and spiritual toll of isolation from community is very real. What's particularly frightening about isolation is how we receive and internalize information when we are cut off. This year we have watched in horror as democracy bleeds out and political schemes are revealed through voter suppression, relentless tweets from the commander-in-chief publicly shaming anyone who dares to raise their voice in dissent. Science has been called into question as we search for certainty in the rubble of endless studies, overwhelming numbers reducing human lives to statistics, and data skewed by capitalist interests. Our way of thinking has become one-dimensional, saturated in blue light from the screens of our iPhones and Androids and television sets. Brain cells turn manic, firing on all cylinders, flooding our arteries with anxiety and fear that nothing seems to adequately soothe. I confess that more than once this year, I experienced moments where I didn't know what to believe, who to trust, or how to respond. It's a dark and lonely place to live. Now, Zechariah's wife, Elizabeth, had her own unique experience of isolation. Upon learning she was, in fact, pregnant, the text tells us she spent 5 months alone. Reading Elizabeth's story gave me chills. I, too, spent 5 months of my own pregnancy apart from the communities to which I belong. But her response is striking. "This is what the Lord has done for me," she says. Now, I'm not suggesting that Elizabeth was full of sheer joy and gratitude. Sure, she was experiencing the beauty and wonder of growing human life, but she was human herself, and she likely felt feelings of fear, sadness, and abandonment. At the same time, though, the text suggests that Elizabeth experienced a particular spiritual grounding, acknowledging the gift of the child she had longed for in the midst of difficult and challenging circumstances. We are constantly looking for and developing ways to cope with the reality COVID-19 has created. We Zoom and FaceTime and Skype, we email and send cards, we actually pick up the phone and call each other. We tend to our bodies and spirits, seeking new ways of experiencing comfort in this particular and unusual time. There's a space in the midst of our new reality that invites us to feel the deep sense of loss we are experiencing, to feel cut off, and to stand in the gap between what was and what is to come. This Advent season is a time to live in that space, to live in that gap, to acknowledge and create space for our loneliness to reside. It is in that darkness and loneliness that the Holy Spirit meets us. Sometimes it's a clear and visceral meeting, like when Mary meets Elizabeth and baby John leaps in her womb. Sometimes it's a painful meeting. sitting in the silence of our homes alone with our tears. Sometimes we only recognize the Spirit when the moment has passed, when suddenly it's December and we realize we've lived through 9 months of pandemic and are still here. Sometimes it brings us comfort to be reminded that God is with us in our loneliness, but most of the time, holding on to a future, holding on to hope, is really hard. It's too taxing. All we can manage is to live in the loneliness of now. What the stories of Zechariah and Elizabeth suggest to us is that the loneliness of now is in fact holy. Maybe that seems counter to what we would expect of holiness, counter to our deep desire for connection, counter to being held in community. It's in the longing that we begin to know God with us. When this pandemic began, I found myself longing for any and every connection to what was, back when I felt that sense of belonging in my bones. And now, I miss even the things I couldn't stand about that old pre-pandemic life. Isolation has a sense of humor in that way. I like to think Elizabeth even missed the sound of Zechariah's voice when he was angry or irritated. All she could hear when he went mute was the sound of his physical body, feet sweeping across the kitchen floor. It was a stark reality against the future gestating in her womb. The cries of a newborn late in the night, the laughter and applause at every new development in that baby's life, the first smile, first laugh, first grunt of discontent. Babies are loud, and Elizabeth's world was quiet. Noise is a sign of life. But the story of Zechariah and Elizabeth suggests that silence is also a sign of life. We can all tolerate a little silence. We may actually long for it in the busyness and calamity of endless commitments and in-person obligations. But prolonged silence, living in the abyss of loneliness, it does begin to eat away at us. Where is life in the midst of silence? Where is hope in the midst of loneliness? How is God addressing us here and now in this season of being cut off from one another? When we light the candle of hope in our Advent wreath, may it be a sign for our commitment to move through this season of isolation fully aware of our loneliness, not burying it, not denying it, not avoiding it. Through Jesus Christ, God reveals to us that we have the capacity to walk through the darkness of our loneliness and abandonment, that hope resides with us in that darkness. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Spirit God.
As we come to God in prayer, a reminder that if you have a joy or concern that you would like to be lifted up in worship, you can submit that to me or to the church office. Contact information is found in the bulletin linked below this video. We also have a prayer chain, and you can email your prayer requests to Lisa Danforth Lewis, whose contact info is also found in the bulletin, and you will be prayed for by our prayer team. Let us continue to God in prayer. It feels strange, O God, to allow ourselves to be alone, alert, afraid, to be anxious. We are constantly trying to change our feelings about our circumstances, and we have become masters of coping. Though learning to cope is certainly necessary for our survival in this world, it should not come at the expense of being able to feel our hearts break. And our hearts are breaking. For a country torn apart, for families divided, for healthcare workers overextended and exposed, for a Congress in gridlock, for Black and brown lives living in fear and under constant threat of violence, for our denial of white supremacy and racial bias so inherent in our ways of life, for homes and livelihoods destroyed by natural disasters, for the lack of care and concern for the earth and your creation. O God, our hearts are breaking. Give us courage to acknowledge our reality. Give us eyes to see in the dark, night vision that can perceive the movement of the Spirit in the shadows. Give us ears to hear in the silence, listening skills so sharp we can hear a pin drop. Give us minds to think critically, emotional intelligence that allows us to embrace the complexity of humanity. Give us hearts with the capacity to hope, even as they break. We pray all these things in the name of Jesus, Emmanuel, God with us, who taught us to pray.
Our Father and Mother, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name.
Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread.
And forgive us our sins as we forgive those who sin against us.
Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
For thine is the kingdom, the power, the glory,
Now and forever. Amen.
Hi everyone, Arthur and our whole family is wishing you a very joyful and blessed Advent season.
The hope of God with us does not come as a guaranteed outcome or predetermined plan or a promise of a happy ending. Hope cannot be imposed from on high. Hope cannot be commanded.
The hope of God with us is courageous, risky, unfolding, indeterminate.
The hope of God with us is collective, liberating us from deadly complacency. Hope is gestating in the silence. It comes unexpectedly. Hope invites our expectation and demands our participation.
Prepare the way for hope.
May hope be birthed among, within, and through us this Advent. Amen.
Save us, thy people, is the bread of life. Still let thy Spirit unto us be given, to heal us wounds and end all bitter strife. Hope of the world, afoot on dusty highways, showing to wandering souls the path of light. Walkst thou beside us, lest the tempting byways lure us away from thee to endless night. Hope of the world, who by thy cross did save us from death and dark despair, from sin and guilt. We render back the love thy mercy gave us. Take thou our lives and use them as thou wilt. Hope of the world, O Christ, o'er death victorious, who by this sign didst conquer grief and pain, we would be faithful to thy gospel glorious. Thou art our Lord, thou dost forever reign.
Hi, my name is Betsy Wharton, and I have a few announcements today before the benediction. As you see, we're welcoming back Pastor Sarah after a wonderful time away with her new family of 3. We are thrilled to have her back with us, and she's planned a number of ways our faith community will be celebrating the Advent season at this time of physical distance. You saw in our Advent 2020 email, there's an Advent activity calendar opportunity, as well as an invitation to make or buy an ornament for our virtual hanging of the greens. Each member of the community can provide an ornament to represent you or your family, and it will be added to the tree in the sanctuary and featured in the weekly worship videos. Please mail your ornament to the church office or be in contact if you need someone to pick yours up. From the outreach team, it's a different year this year for the Mary's Place Giving Tree. They will be still providing important Christmas cheer, and there are a variety of ways to donate and support the cause. Please go to marysplaceseattle.org to see how you can help. The Hats for the Homeless effort is still underway. If you knit or crochet or you wish you knew how, please be in contact with Shirley Lindbergh or the church office. Hats will be distributed at the welcome table, and Shirley is ready with yarn, patterns, and enthusiasm, and will pick up any completed projects too. From the discipleship team, the Intergenerational Book Club had a fantastic first gathering last week, including the author who joined the Zoom meeting. They meet again in January, so stay tuned for details. From the relationship team, we're having Zoom sessions to keep us connected, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. or Tuesday evenings at 7 p.m. There are a number of reasons to visit the church website, tibbettsumchurch.org. The worship tab on the left side is where you can see all of the worship videos, past and present. And on the news and events tab, there are links to the Zoom sessions we're holding. In addition to the links for relationship and discipleship activities, we also have a Bible study that meets every Wednesday morning at 10 a.m. On the subscribe tab, you can see how to receive our weekly announcement emails, which are sent out on Thursdays. It's a great way to stay in touch with your Tibbetts family and the news of the church. If you have a prayer request, please email the church office and we will be glad to include you in the prayer chain. Have a wonderful day and a blessed week ahead. Bye.